G'day guys, welcome back to True Footy for my thoughts on round 8. Apologies for the lack of videos last week. I would have done the round review last week, but to be honest with you, I didn't even watch any games of football last week, including my team getting annihilated by 109 points. Only caught, the highlights and a bit of play in between breaks at work. So I just didn't think I had it in me to do a round review. And then later in the week, just wasn't feeling very well. And Saturday was going to do a live stream of the Eagles game again, not feeling well. I've tested negative to a few rats. But perhaps I would have tested positive to being a little bitch. I just didn't feel up for it. So apologies, but we're back this week. It was another good round of footy once again to cap off round 8. I think I got 6 out of 9 correct tips, so somewhat predictable. There's a couple of doozies in there, a couple of upset wins and a 50-50 that I just got wrong. But we'll go through all that and unpack. And it's been a couple of weeks since I've done this video, so there's probably a few talking points to go through, and I feel like we've certainly learned a lot more about certain teams over the last fortnight or so. As always, guys, the videos on this channel are brought to you by our sponsors, MANSCAPED.com, for all your male grooming needs for the body trimmer, lawnmower 4.0, and all their liquid formulations, everything down to ball wipes they have on their website. And the cool thing is you get 20% off and free shipping if you use the code TrueFooty20 at checkout on their website. So that's MANSCAPED.com, TrueFooty20, and you get an awesome discount and free shipping. So the round kicked off with Port Adelaide getting the job done against the Western Bulldogs by 17 points at the end at Adelaide Oval. This one was sort of a 50-50. I feel like the Bulldogs were favourites, and that's why I tipped them. But sure enough, the power came through, making it 3 wins on the trot and well and truly keeping their season alive. If you look at the ladder, I think only a few percent separate Port and the Western Bulldogs now. So if you still consider the Bulldogs a finals chance, which I think you should, then you have to consider Port Adelaide still a finals chance despite, starting the season 0-5. They've done everything right since then, and almost have their season back on track. There's still a bit of work to do though, for sure. On the positive side for them, it seems like a couple of key forwards in the absence of Dixon, like Finlayson and Marshall over the last few weeks, have started to really pick up some momentum, starting to find a role in that team. The two kicked 5 goals between them in this particular match. But equally on the flip side, the Dogs are looking, a bit meek and toothless at the moment. I know they had some injuries. I think they got 3 injuries in this game. Marcus Bontempelli was rested. But over the course of the season, there's just something missing. They have lost that hardness, I think. I'm not too sure what to put the finger on. Some of their footy has been fairly good this year, but they just haven't put that end product on the scoreboard at times this year. Again, winning the inside 50 count in this particular game. We know they've been inaccurate at times, although that wasn't really their issue on Friday night. So all in all, just looking a little bit mediocre. And you look at the star power in that team, they're certainly capable of a lot more, as we saw last year at times, looking like the best team in the competition. So the two narratives out of this game are Port Adelaide resurrect their season slightly. There's still not really too much room for mistakes throughout the rest of the year, but the Bulldogs are trending towards that direction where they can't afford too many slip-ups from this point either, because it's certainly not a guarantee at this stage that they're going to be in the finals this year. Then we doubled up with another Friday night game for some reason. I'm not too sure. I wonder if the AFL tried to limit the amount of games on Mother's Day, which is very, very socially conscious of them. But either way, Freo had their first Friday night home game, or Friday night game in general, since 2016, I think, which is ludicrous. And sure enough, they chose that primetime time slot to absolutely annihilate North Melbourne. And, I didn't do a review video last week when Fremantle beat Geelong because I didn't see the game, but you'd be silly now not to have Fremantle seriously rising up your estimations in terms of, who are the best teams in the competition. I think on current form, they're certainly the 3rd best team in the comp. Yes, this was a win over North Melbourne, who are a truly dreadful football team on current form at the moment. Obviously, there's still a while to go in the season left, and they're a young side. They can resurrect it in time and maybe get something out of this year, but for what we've seen this year, they've been absolutely shocking. But the impressive part with Fremantle was the way they played was very clean, and they were good enough to put North Melbourne to the sword, to crack 100 points themselves, win by 78 points, and just concede the 3 goals, I think it was, on the Friday night. They looked far too good, and the standard of football from Fremantle was very impressive too. They had the number of their outs. They're missing, 4 or 5 players to COVID. Maybe it's less than that. I'm not too sure, but a couple of young guys slotting into that team. Jai Amos comes in and joins the first goal, first kick club. So for them, when you look at their team, the missing piece is kind of the forward line, but it seems to be in the wings. They've got some good talent there with Amos. I think Josh Tracy has a bit of a future, and even Sam Sturt, who I think was, he was an emergency for this game. The talent Fremantle are assembling, it's looking very, very nice. And I did actually do a video on Fremantle's rebuild. I think it was the most recent video on this channel. So if you're a Dockers fan, it might be worth checking out. For North, I don't really feel the need to pile on any more than I have. They've looked pretty dreadful AFL this year, and this was a continuation of that. So they're going to want to start moving in the right direction soon. Richmond then played Collingwood on the Saturday morning game, and Richmond, another side who are putting together some good form. It's been a Jekyll and Hyde season. As I said in my preseason video, I expected this kind of year for Richmond. The last 2 weeks have gone a long way to making me feel confident that they could actually feature in September this year. Yes, they annihilated a very pathetic West Coast last week, but I thought from what I saw of the game, Richmond looked very clean, and as poor as the Eagles are at the moment, it still takes a pretty good team to score 165 points, and it looks like they did carry that form into this game with a 5-goal win over the Collingwood Footy Club, who a few weeks ago I would have said was definitely better than Richmond. So Tom Lynch in particular has been a massive focal point, absolutely up there in the Coleman medal stakes. I think he might even be leading it right now, or he's not far behind. He kicked 6 last week, kicked 6 this week. And as Jack Riewoldt starts to decline, due to his age, Tigers fans can rest assured knowing that Tom Lynch is going to be an absolutely massive focal point for the Richmond Footy Club. Nankervis was a beast in the ruck. I know Collingwood don't have Grundy at the moment, but this was a good 8-point win considering, Richmond are 8th on the ladder, Collingwood are 9th. We're starting to see a more sort of settled version of what the final ladder is going to look like, and they're genuinely both competing for a final spot there. So it's an important win. And I think with the quality of football I'm seeing from Richmond, they look like a finals quality side. They just got to stop dropping random winnable games. For Collingwood, this is a bit of a setback, this loss. I know they're without Grundy, who is an important player when you don't have, necessarily a good ruckman to stand in place of him. But I do think that Richmond were a little bit wasteful in this game, and it could have been a much bigger margin. So they're still a young side. We don't want to inflate expectations just because they had a good start to the year, but losing this game was definitely a blow to their finals hopes. Next up, we had the upset of the round between the Gold Coast Suns and the Sydney Footy Club at the SCG, and what a surprising result this was. There seems to be a little knack where Gold Coast has a habit of beating Sydney. I think they've beaten Sydney 2 out of the last couple of times in Sydney, and I think they beat them at Metricon 1 time recently as well. So if I'm not mistaken, that's like 3 out of the last 4 times they've played, which is so at odds with logic when, Sydney have been a good team for the last couple of years, but the Gold Coast Suns just seem to have them as their bunny. It's been a couple of disappointing weeks in a row for the Swans. Obviously a big contest last week against the Brisbane Lions. They fell well short of that test, and then to lose to their other Queensland team at home, it's a big blow when you've got teams emerging like Fremantle, who's, without looking at it, a couple of wins ahead of them now. So they're a bloody good team, Sydney. They just can't keep faltering and dropping wins like this. I think we saw that last year where at times they looked, top 2, top 3, top 4 quality. Again, we're seeing a similar story here where just dropping a few winnable games might be the difference between them making top 4 and missing. For the Suns, this is a huge morale boosting victory. They're now 3 wins and 5 losses, which puts them on level pegging with Port Adelaide and the Western Bulldogs, and who would have predicted that at the start of the year, that after 8 rounds, the Gold Coast Suns would be on the same amount of wins as Port Adelaide and the Western Bulldogs. Then the following game, GWS, the other expansion side, hosted Geelong down at Marnicus Stadium, where Geelong are coming off a disappointing loss in their eyes to Fremantle the previous week, needed to come out and bag 4 points, and that they did very convincingly, and GWS are backing up a pretty good, if inexplicable, win last week against Adelaide. Other than that performance this year, they've looked very, very listless. And if I'm not mistaken, they currently sit in the bottom 4, which is reflective of how poor they've been. Once again, in this game, didn't really fire too much of a shot, scoring just 35 points for the game and getting slaughtered by Geelong. For the Cats, it's a good bounce back. For me, they're looking a little bit shaky in recent times, obviously with a loss at home to Fremantle and a loss to Hawthorn not too long before that. Big bright side for them has been the form of Tyson Stengel, who might low-key be one of the better recruits of the off-season, especially when you consider the price they paid for him. Must be frustrating for an Adelaide, and I think it was Richmond before that who had Stengel on their list, to see him now go to Geelong and become a very, very handy footballer. But all in all, this game more or less went to script, and the pressure continues to mount on Leon Cameron. On Saturday night, we saw one of the better games of the round, Essendon playing Hawthorn at Marvel Stadium, and I guess you could say it was an upset. These two teams generally have good contests between them, but Hawthorn have been far more compelling this year compared to Essendon, who have been downright disappointing, and again, another team that sits, I think, in the bottom 4 still. Apparently, a virus swept through Essendon this week, and they lost, 4 or 5 players late, but that adversity seemed to galvanise them, and even though the Hawks led for most of the contest, it was a massive last quarter for the Dons. I think they kicked 8 goals or something like that to completely steamroll the Hawks. Darcy Parish was typically good. Dyson Heppel bobbed up and had a good performance. He was under some fire, some criticism from fans in recent weeks for not being, performing well enough as a leader, and he stepped up in great fashion against the Hawks. And again, 2 metre Peter Wright is one of the best recruits for Essendon in a long, long time. 6 goals today. He's ranking fairly high in the common, if I'm not mistaken, and he's a forward ruck. He was obviously a high draft pick for the Gold Coast Suns back in 2014, sold at a massive discount considering his contract, and he's become a very, very good player for Essendon. I have to acknowledge the efforts of Ben Hobbs as well, one of the rising star candidates who had a massive last quarter and was really, really important in Essendon gaining momentum and eventually winning the game. For the Hawks, they'll be disappointed with this result. They've been better than Essendon this year, and now with that loss, they sink back down to 12th, below the team Port Adelaide that they beat by 64 points on their home deck. So again, a young side showing some inconsistency, but they'll be frustrated with where they're at. On Saturday night, Brisbane then hosted West Coast in one of the most tantalising matchups of the round for the neutral. I am sure it was a wet, soggy Saturday night. And when you consider the form the Eagles have been going into this game, I ridiculously heard some calls that it might be a 200-point win as well, which, is hard to argue against considering how much West Coast suck and how good Brisbane were, particularly against Sydney, and how good they've been over a period of time now. But it was a wet, dour affair. I think the Eagles did well to, suppress Brisbane's dominance. I wouldn't go as far as to say the Eagles had the better of the contested stuff or anything like that, but it was at least more or less halved, and I think it was where the outside, the transition ball, where Brisbane really took a hold of the game and really showed the difference in class between the two sides. So unlike the previous 3 weeks, West Coast kind of had a bit of a injury excuse and COVID excuse. I think we had to field 2 or 3 top-ups in this game, 21 unavailable players as well. So when you consider that, we were just looking for the minimal effort, and I think West Coast hit the minimum level of expectation we have for effort, and that's why I don't think we're too critical on that loss. And again, I don't know how much we can take from it from Brisbane. We already know they're a bloody good side. Hugh McCluggage, we already know he's a jet. He's definitely an all-Australian caliber player, 4 goals and 26 possessions. And for the Lions, one of the takeaways from this game may unfortunately be the loss of Dan McStay. I'm not too sure what the prognosis was on that one, but it appeared to be a pretty nasty ankle injury. So we'll wait and see on that. But considering the loss of Hipwood already, he's not a player that they want to be missing large chunks of the season. Then earlier today, Melbourne took on St Kilda at the MCG on Mother's Day, and I actually turned the telly on when it was 56 plays 9 Melbourne's way, and I figured, Melbourne were just a dominant football team. They're bloody good. But everything I watched after that point, St Kilda kind of had the better of them. I think they won the clearances after that point and certainly outscored them. So when you're 56 plays 9 down in a game, naturally the inclination is to maybe drop your head a bit and accept that you're just going to get pounded by the reigning premiership team. But we didn't see that from St Kilda. I thought it was a fairly impressive second half, and even though the margin stayed at 4 or 5 goals for a lot of that half as well, I kept thinking this is actually a relatively engaging game of footy. So St Kilda will rue their poor start. They probably could have made it a much better contest of this game, but ultimately Melbourne are the best in the business, and it was another really good performance. Melbourne are just so hard to contend with when you've got outside players like Langdon and Brayshaw. Langdon played one of his best games at AFL level, at least that I can recall, and obviously the Bruce on the inside like Oliver and Petrarca and Viney. And I'm not really telling you anything you don't already know about this football club. They are very, very hard to beat. Until next week, which is their biggest test against West Coast in Perth. And finally, the final game of the round was Carlton versus Adelaide today at Marvel Stadium. And again, this game was a little bit more engaging than the scoreline would suggest. Certainly in the first half, I thought Adelaide really brought a good intensity to the game. Again, it's so handy having a player of the caliber of Taylor Walker in that team, but their skills were good, their pressure was good. I really liked the way Adelaide show up to every game, and perhaps not the GWS effort, but even though Carlton kept pulling away in that first half, you certainly got the sense that Adelaide could pinch this game. But what we saw in the third term was Carlton is just simply a much better football team, and they absolutely swarmed the Crows, and it was some very, very good performances from the Carlton Footy Club. In particular, Paddy Cripps may have set himself up with another 3-vote game. He was really influential both on the inside and the outside as well. And again, that was probably one of the better games I've seen Charlie Curnow play. He was looming as a massive threat in the forward half, and you can certainly make the case that on current form, Curnow and Mackay are not far off the caliber of Hawkins and Jeremy Cameron as a duo. Curnow, I believe, today moved himself into the top 5 of the Coleman, and it was a dominant performance. They just couldn't stay with him. After some unconvincing weeks in recent times, Carlton really looked like the real deal again in this game. And again, not the most difficult opposition, but it was a good skill level game. And with that victory and handy percentage boost, they now find themselves outright in the top 4. And at 6-2, look in a great position to set themselves up for finals. And I think looking at the ladder as it is, I think the order will change, but I reckon we've got the top 7 there locked in as teams that I really think will make finals. And Richmond in 8th is the questionable one. You've probably got, Collingwood, the Bulldogs, Port Adelaide, potentially Hawthorn as well, clamouring for that 8th position. I'm probably making a stupidly early call, but it's hard to make a case in my mind that any of the top 7 are now going to miss finals. But let me know in the comments your thoughts on that and all the other comments that I've made in this video. Hope you're enjoying the content, guys. Thanks for bearing with me over the last 7 days where I just haven't been up to making videos, but we'll be on the Drew Footy Show again this week, and you can expect a footy tipping video this week as well. So stay tuned, guys. Thanks for the support, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.